There comes a moment in every person's life when something shifts, quietly, internally, yet unmistakably. A moment when you begin to see what you were never supposed to see. A moment when the world you lived in no longer fits the person you're becoming. That moment is the beginning of your awakening and, unfortunately, the beginning of a war you never chose. What most people don't understand is that awakening does not start in peace. It starts in conflict. Not because you desire conflict, but because your transformation disturbs everything that depended on your old unconscious self. Awakening disrupts the unconscious agreements you had with others because it breaks the silent, unspoken contracts that have shaped your identity, your relationships, and your place within the social world. Long before you ever woke up, you were operating under expectations that were never explicitly stated but deeply understood. These agreements are woven into your childhood, your culture, your friendships, and the power dynamics you unconsciously participated in. They define who you are allowed to be, how much space you can take, how much truth you can speak, and how much of your real self you are permitted to reveal. Most relationships are based on these invisible agreements. They are the subtle exchanges that keep the peace, sustain roles, and maintain predictability. For example, you may have lived under an unspoken agreement to always be the listener, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, the one who doesn't complain, the one who stays quiet so others can remain comfortable. Or perhaps you agreed without ever saying it, to play small so others could feel big, to dim your intelligence so others wouldn't feel insecure, to suppress your desires so others wouldn't be challenged by your ambition. These agreements seem harmless because they operate beneath the surface of awareness, giving the illusion of harmony while slowly draining your authenticity. Awakening is the moment you begin to question these invisible contracts. It is the realization that you have spent years, maybe even decades, participating in emotional arrangements that never truly served your growth. You begin to see how often you said yes when your soul was screaming no, how often you tolerated less than you deserved, how often you betrayed your inner truth to preserve a version of yourself that others preferred. This recognition is unsettling because it forces you to confront the ways you were complicit in your own limitation. But it is also liberating because once you see these agreements clearly, you can no longer return to unconscious participation. The people around you feel this shift immediately, even if you don't say a word. Suddenly, you are no longer giving what you used to give. You are no longer absorbing what you once absorbed. You stop accommodating the emotional laziness of others. You stop sacrificing your peace to maintain relationships. You begin to speak truths you previously swallowed. You assert boundaries instead of silently enduring violations. You express needs you once buried. This change disrupts the equilibrium others had come to rely on, creating a ripple of discomfort, confusion, or even hostility. Not everyone will respond with understanding. Some will feel threatened. Your awakening exposes a part of them that benefited from your compliance. They may interpret your growth as rebellion, your clarity as arrogance, your boundaries as disrespect. What they are really reacting to is the loss of privilege they enjoyed under the old agreement. When you stop being who they needed you to be for their comfort, they may perceive it as a personal attack, even though it is simply the result of your inner evolution. Awakening also disrupts agreements that were rooted in shared dysfunction. Many relationships are built on mutual wounds. One person plays the rescuer, another plays the victim, one plays the stable one, another the chaotic one plays the giver, the other the taker. When you awaken, you break your role in these patterns. You refuse to participate in cycles that drain your spirit. You stop enabling the emotional blindness of others. This forces them to confront their own shadows, something they may not be ready or willing to do. Instead of rising to meet your transformation, they may try to drag you back into the old dynamic where everything felt familiar, even if it wasn't healthy. Awakening also disrupts social and cultural agreements. You begin to see how much of your identity was shaped by external expectations, what success should look like, what love should be, what suffering you must endure, what dreams are realistic, and what parts of yourself must be hidden to fit in. You no longer move through the world on autopilot. You no longer accept narratives that suffocate your spirit. This inevitably challenges the belief systems of others who still rely on these narratives for their sense of stability. Your transformation becomes a mirror reflecting their stagnation, and not everyone can look into that mirror without discomfort. As you continue to awaken, you learn that the breaking of these unconscious agreements was not a betrayal, but an act of self-loyalty. Most people awaken only when the discomfort of staying asleep becomes greater than the discomfort of becoming aware. And once that awareness begins, there is no returning to the old roles, the old silence, the old version of yourself that existed only to maintain agreements you never consciously chose. Your growth exposes the shadows people refuse to face because personal evolution is inherently disruptive. As you develop awareness, courage, and a sense of self that is unapologetically authentic, you begin to illuminate areas of life and consciousness that others have chosen to ignore or suppress. Growth is not simply a private journey, it radiates outward, whether through the confidence in your voice, the clarity in your decisions, or the boundaries you establish. This radiance acts like a mirror, reflecting back to those around you aspects of themselves they may find uncomfortable, threatening, or shameful. In essence, your transformation forces others to confront the parts of their own psyche they have long denied or hidden. People often construct identities built upon avoidance. They dress their insecurities in armor, their fears in silence, and their unresolved wounds in projection. They live in worlds where denial is safer than truth and avoidance is preferable to confrontation. The moment your growth manifests, it pierces this protective veil. Your courage to speak honestly, to live fully, and to prioritize your own truth highlights the stagnation in their lives. They see the contrast between their muted existence and your emerging clarity, and it is not flattering, it is destabilizing. The shadows they refuse to face, the parts of themselves they bury, ignore, or distort, become impossible to ignore when confronted with someone who has begun to step into the light. This exposure can trigger discomfort, resentment, and even aggression. People often resist acknowledging their shadows because facing them requires responsibility, honesty, and action, all of which carry psychological and emotional cost. When they observe your growth, they unconsciously recognize the areas where they have failed to evolve. Your courage highlights their avoidance. Your discipline reveals their inconsistency. Your authenticity unmasks the pretenses they have built to navigate the world safely. The very act of growing becomes, in their perception, a challenge to the safety of their constructed realities, forcing them to reconcile with parts of themselves they have long resisted. Growth also exposes hidden jealousy and envy. When you achieve clarity, confidence, or success, it is natural for others to compare themselves to you. They may resent the light you carry because it reminds them of the potential within themselves that they have neglected. Your ability to remain true to your path, to resist compromise for the sake of external approval, can provoke silent judgment. People may unconsciously wish you would falter or shrink back to the person they once knew because your transformation threatens the equilibrium they have maintained in their own lives. The shadows are not only the parts of themselves they deny, but also the parts they wish to suppress in others to protect their fragile sense of control or superiority. Your growth can also unsettle social dynamics. In families, friendships, workplaces, or communities, your evolution may challenge established roles and hierarchies. People have adapted to your previous self, and they have woven routines, expectations, and assumptions around it. When you change, you break these unconscious agreements, and this can provoke defensive responses. Those who have relied on your compliance, silence, or limited expression may suddenly feel destabilized. Your courage to redefine your boundaries, to speak truth, or to pursue personal integrity acts as a spotlight on the shadows of avoidance, denial, and fear that have underpinned the lives of those around you. Moreover, your growth can highlight the moral and ethical compromises others have accepted. The decisions you make to live authentically, choosing integrity over convenience, awareness over ignorance, or courage over fear, reflect the choices others have avoided making. They may feel a subtle yet intense discomfort, because your actions make visible the hypocrisy, fear, or avoidance that they have normalized. Your emergence into self-awareness is a silent critique of their inaction, yet it carries no judgment except that which they project onto you. The shadows being exposed are the unresolved elements of their own character that they have refused to examine, and your presence simply refuses to hide them anymore. Even when people love you or care for you, your growth can provoke internal conflict within them. They may feel torn between admiration and fear, gratitude and envy, hope and discomfort. The human psyche often prefers familiarity over growth because it is easier to navigate predictable patterns than to confront uncertainty or pain. Your transformation, however, is a force that refuses to conform to their comfort zones. In exposing their shadows, you are not attacking them, you are merely being yourself, embodying the aspects of life they have neglected, the courage they have not yet found, and the truth they have resisted acknowledging. Your evolution is a silent revolution. The invisible war begins within before it appears around you, because the moment of awakening is fundamentally an internal confrontation. Before the outer world reacts, before relationships are tested, before resistance manifests in subtle sabotage or outright conflict, the first battlefield is the self. It is here, in the quiet chambers of your mind and heart, that the struggle begins, often unnoticed by anyone else. The invisible war is not initially about people, circumstances, or events. It is about the internal tension between who you were conditioned to be and who you are becoming. Every step toward awareness triggers an inner resistance, a friction that arises from long-held beliefs, fears, and patterns that have governed your behavior without your conscious consent. At the beginning of this internal conflict, you may notice a profound dissonance. Habits that once felt natural now seem restrictive. Comfort zones that once provided safety now feel suffocating. The routines that maintained emotional equilibrium now reveal themselves as barriers to growth. This dissonance is the first indication that the war has begun. It is subtle yet relentless, an internal questioning that asks, am I truly living my own life, or am I merely existing in the expectations of others? The internal struggle is not violent in a physical sense, but its intensity can feel like a storm within, a constant push and pull between fear and courage, inertia and action, compliance and authenticity. This invisible battle is also psychological. It pits the conditioned self, the collection of fears, anxieties, learned behaviors, and unconscious agreements, against the emerging self that seeks truth, integrity, and alignment with one's deeper purpose. The conditioned self resists change because change threatens its survival. It fears uncertainty, discomfort, and rejection, and it clings to familiar patterns even when they no longer serve. Meanwhile, the emerging self is drawn toward growth, awareness, and expansion, and it demands attention and acknowledgement. The tension between these two forces creates a battlefield inside your mind, where every decision, every thought, and every emotion becomes a contested territory. The invisible war also manifests as emotional turbulence. As you begin to question old beliefs and embrace new truths, feelings that were long suppressed or ignored rise to the surface. Anxiety, doubt, guilt, and shame often accompany this process because the mind resists what it does not understand. You may find yourself oscillating between self-doubt and self-assertion, feeling both exhilarated and terrified by the same revelations. These emotional currents are not random. They are the internal skirmishes of a mind at war with itself, a psyche attempting to reconcile old conditioning with the new realities of growth and awareness. The more profound your awakening, the more intense these internal battles often become. The internal struggle also shapes perception and decision-making. Suddenly, the things you once accepted unquestioningly, relationships, career paths, social norms, come under scrutiny. The comfort of conformity begins to feel like a cage, and the pressure to maintain appearances conflicts with the desire to live authentically. Decisions that once felt simple now carry weight, because they are infused with the awareness of consequence, choice, and alignment. The inner war forces you to confront not only what is around you, but what is within you, the fears, unresolved wounds, and unconscious drives that have quietly governed your life. Another dimension of this internal war is the confrontation with shadow aspects of the self. The shadow consists of those parts of your psyche that have been rejected, denied, or disowned. Traits, desires, and impulses that society, family, or personal upbringing taught you to suppress. Awakening inevitably brings these elements to light. The invisible war begins as you face these shadows without judgment, recognizing that they are part of you and learning how to integrate them rather than deny or project them. This confrontation is uncomfortable and often terrifying because it requires honesty, courage, and humility. It demands that you acknowledge patterns and behaviors you may have rationalized or ignored for years. Finally, the invisible war within prepares the terrain for the conflicts that will later manifest externally. Your internal alignment, clarity, and boundaries determine how the outer world responds to your transformation. The battles in your mind and heart are rehearsal for the challenges to come. The misalignments, misunderstandings, and resistance that arise when others cannot accommodate the new version of you. But these external manifestations are only symptoms. The real struggle, the one that determines whether you stand firm or falter, is the one fought silently within, in the mind, in the heart, and in the soul. People attack what they secretly envy or fear losing control over because human behavior is often driven more by unconscious impulses than by conscious reasoning. Envy and fear are powerful motivators, shaping interactions, decisions, and relationships in ways that are rarely acknowledged. When someone sees another person achieving clarity, success, freedom, or inner strength, it can awaken a deep discomfort within them, one that is rooted in their own unfulfilled desires, insecurities, or loss of perceived power. The reaction is rarely rational. It is instinctive. To attack becomes a means of reclaiming a sense of balance, of restoring the equilibrium that their psyche feels has been disrupted by the presence of someone who embodies what they themselves secretly desire but have not attained. Envy is a shadow emotion that thrives in secrecy. Most people are unwilling or unable to admit their longing for what others have, especially if it highlights their own deficiencies or perceived failures. When someone else achieves what they covet, be it personal growth, freedom from limitation, emotional mastery, or professional success, their unconscious mind may interpret it as a threat. It is easier to lash out than to confront the uncomfortable reality that they have neglected or suppressed their own potential. The attack is not always overt. It can take the form of subtle criticism, passive-aggressive behavior, gossip, or attempts to undermine the other person's achievements. These behaviors are external manifestations of an internal struggle, a projection of envy and fear onto the object of their discomfort. Fear is equally compelling. People fear losing control over what they once believed they possessed or could influence. When someone grows, awakens, or transforms, the relational or social dynamics they previously relied upon shift. Friends, family members, colleagues, and even communities may feel destabilized when an individual no longer fits into the expected roles. What they once controlled, your opinions, your behavior, your decisions, is now autonomous. This loss of influence triggers fear, often accompanied by anxiety or resentment. Fear of losing control can drive behaviors that are destructive, manipulative, or coercive, as people attempt to restore the perceived balance or to assert dominance over what they feel slipping away. The psychology behind these attacks is rooted in projection. People externalize their inner turmoil by attributing their own fears, weaknesses, or desires to others. When they see someone living a life they themselves secretly long for or resisting patterns they remain trapped in, they may label that person as arrogant, reckless, or undeserving. By projecting their own envy or fear outward, they temporarily shield themselves from confronting the uncomfortable truth within. Attacking the other person becomes a defense mechanism, a way to maintain the illusion of stability, superiority, or control. It is often unconscious, and yet the emotional impact on the person being attacked can be profound, creating confusion, doubt, and even guilt for simply existing as they are. Envy and fear also intersect with social comparison. Humans have an innate tendency to measure themselves against others, and the metrics are rarely fair or accurate. When someone surpasses these comparisons, consciously or unconsciously, it can evoke insecurity and a need to reassert hierarchy. Attack becomes a tool to undermine the threat perceived in another's success. This is especially true when the growth of one person highlights the stagnation, complacency, or self-denial of others. Their inner world, long shielded from reflection, suddenly becomes visible through the lens of your evolution, provoking feelings of inadequacy, defensiveness, and hostility. In essence, the attack is an attempt to realign reality with their comfort zone, to diminish what they cannot yet achieve themselves. Power dynamics also play a critical role. When someone attains clarity, emotional intelligence, or autonomy, they shift the balance of influence. Others may feel disempowered, exposed, or irrelevant in response. The attack is not necessarily personal. It is a reaction to the perceived threat to authority, control, or established patterns. People unconsciously attempt to neutralize the threat by undermining, criticizing, or sabotaging the individual who has upset their sense of order. It is a primal response rooted in self-preservation. If they cannot rise to the same level, the next best option in their mind is to pull the other down. Moreover, attacks driven by envy or fear often escalate when the individual being attacked demonstrates resilience, confidence, or continued growth. The more they embody what the attacker lacks, the more intense the projections become. Subtle remarks turn into overt criticism, envy morphs into resentment, and fear transforms into efforts to manipulate or control outcomes. These behaviors are less about the person being attacked and more about the internal battles of those projecting their insecurities outward. They are a mirror of the shadows that remain unacknowledged within the attacker, and the confrontation, while externalized, reflects an internal war against their own limitations, unrealized potential, and unresolved fears. The real battle is not against others, but against the parts of you that want to return to sleep, because true awakening is as much an internal struggle as it is an external journey. Most people believe that growth is about changing circumstances, overcoming obstacles, or confronting external opposition. While these factors are part of the experience, the primary challenge lies within: the inertia of habit, the seduction of comfort, and the relentless pull of old patterns that whisper to you to remain small, passive, or disengaged. These parts of yourself, familiar, convenient, and seemingly safe, resist transformation because they have always protected you, even if their protection now limits your potential. The internal battle begins the moment you realize that your greatest adversary is not the world around you, but the self that longs for familiarity, ease, and unconscious repetition. This battle manifests in subtle and insidious ways. The parts of you that want to return to sleep are not overtly hostile. They do not announce their intentions. Instead, they operate through self-doubt, procrastination, rationalization, and distraction. They whisper, "It's not the right time, you're not ready, or you don't need to push so hard." Remind you of comfort over challenge, safety over risk, and the familiar over the unknown. These internal voices are persuasive because they are rooted in the past, drawing on memories of fear, failure, or disappointment to maintain the status quo. They appeal to your desire for security, creating the illusion that resisting growth is protective, when in reality it is the very thing that keeps you trapped. The parts of yourself that resist awakening are also tied to identity. For years, you have been defined by certain roles, behaviors, and beliefs that shaped your interactions with the world. These identities, once useful, become chains when you try to evolve beyond them. To awaken fully is to question everything you thought you knew about yourself, to confront the narratives you've clung to, the labels you've accepted, and the self-images you've maintained for approval or safety. This confrontation is uncomfortable because it shakes the foundation of familiarity. Your old self fights for preservation, luring you back into patterns that feel known and manageable, even if they no longer serve your growth. Fear is at the core of this eternal struggle. The unknown is terrifying, and the parts of you that want to sleep exploit this fear. They remind you of potential failure, rejection, or embarrassment. They magnify risks and minimize rewards. They make inertia feel safer than action. They make silence feel more noble than expression. These internal forces operate like a gravitational pull, drawing you back to passivity and compliance, urging you to ignore the stirrings of change that demand courage, honesty, and persistence. The battle is relentless because the mind has been trained over a lifetime to value comfort over truth, and awakening demands a radical realignment of priorities. Resistance also arises from unresolved pain and unacknowledged shadows. The deeper your awakening, the more these dormant parts of your psyche surface, demanding attention. Past wounds, insecurities, and fears resurface to test your commitment to growth. These are the elements that have long gone unexamined, and the parts of you that want to sleep seek to avoid confronting them. To awaken fully is to look these shadows in the eye, integrate their lessons, and reclaim the energy you previously surrendered to avoidance. This process is neither linear nor gentle. It is a constant negotiation between courage and comfort, between authenticity and denial. The internal battle is amplified by external pressures, yet these pressures are only catalysts. The true war is psychological and spiritual, waged in the quiet moments of decision-making, reflection, and self-observation. Every choice to act despite fear, every commitment to speak truth instead of silence, every insistence on integrity over compromise represents a victory against the parts of yourself that would rather remain asleep. The battle is ongoing because the pull of old patterns never entirely disappears. It re-emerges in moments of stress, fatigue, or uncertainty, testing your resolve and reminding you that growth is a continuous process of vigilance and self-awareness. This struggle also demands discipline. Awakening is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing commitment to conscious living. The parts of you that want to sleep thrive on lapses in attention, rationalizations, and passive routines. They seek to exploit moments of weakness, convincing you that retreat is reasonable, that compliance is safe, or that surrender is acceptable. The battle is therefore fought not only in the grand gestures of change, but in the small daily choices, choosing presence over distraction, honesty over pretense, action over inertia, and courage over fear. Each decision to remain awake strengthens the parts of you aligned with growth and weakens the resistance embedded in your psyche. The tension between awakening and the desire to return to sleep is also a test of self-trust. As you evolve, you must learn to rely on your own discernment, intuition, and inner guidance rather than external validation or familiar routines. The parts of you that resist change exploit dependency, doubt, and insecurity, attempting to divert your attention and energy. The battle is therefore as much about reclaiming trust in yourself as it is about resisting old habits. Every moment of awareness, reflection, and conscious choice chips away at the influence of the self that seeks comfort over growth, reinforcing your commitment to transformation.